All right, may the March 14, 2016 meeting of the Danville Utility Commission please come to order. Please call the roll.
Ms. Kane? Mr. Donahue?
Present.
Mr. Larkin?
Here.
Mr. Nicholas?
Here.
Mr. Shassey? Mr. Shanks?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Turpin?
Here.
Are there any announcements anyone would like to make this time? Let's move on to the reading of the February minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Mr. Nicholas moves to approve the minutes as submitted. Are there any additions, deletions, or amendments to those minutes? If not, I will ask for a vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. And the minutes are approved unanimously. Next item is review of the utilities financial statements.
Mr. Smith, you didn't get a second on the minutes.
I sure didn't, did I?
Sorry.
Can we say,
I seconded.
Mr. I didn't hear him. I'm sorry. I'm having a hearing problem.
Second is not required for the minutes anyway. So
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Mr. Atkins is now going to review the financial statements with us. Mr. Atkins.
I am. Patricia Connor was out unexpectedly today with illness, so I'm pinch hitting for her, so bear with me as I use someone else's materials, but I've reviewed them, so I'll share the information with you. You have in your packet today the statements as of January 31st, marking the 7th month of completion for the fiscal year, or 58% of the fiscal year. So we'll start on page 9, where the individual fund statements start with wastewater. If you're looking there, you'll see that wastewater reports operating revenue at $5.6 million. That is in line with our budget at 58% and compares favorably to last year. The operating expenses for wastewater are within budgeted levels, actually a little under, which is good, at 52%. Total operating expenses show a 5% increase from last year, and again, as we mentioned in the past, this is primarily in the transmission and treatment lines. Administrative expenses are up about 11% due to increased depreciation, and since we refunded some bonds at the very beginning of this fiscal year, our utility funds have some bond issue expenses in there that they did not have last year, so that's another reason for the administrative increase. So with revenues right at budget and expenses being contained under budget, the net income is favorable when compared to budget and last year, or to budget. After transfers, it's reported at $1.5 million. Like I said, that does compare favorably to last year and is 87% of our budgeted amount at this time. Next page 10, is the water fund. You'll see the water fund revenues are operating slightly ahead of budget at 59% to $4.8 million. This is a slight decrease of 3% from last year. The operating expenses of $3.2 million are within budgeted levels at 53% of budget, a 6% increase from last year. Again, this increase is primarily related to transmission and treatment due to additional expenses for chemical supplies, as we mentioned last month. Again, the administrative expenses also show a slight increase due to depreciation in those bond issue expenses. After factoring in the non-operating revenue and expenses, the water fund reports net income after transfers of $1 million. While this is a decrease from last year, it is 99% of our budget for this year, so it's very much on track. Page 11, our gas fund. As you recall, we did have a mild start to the winter and the heating season, and our revenues do reflect that. Year-to-date sales and gas purchases are only at 46% of our budgeted amounts. Revenues were down about 16%, or $2.2 million when compared to last year, again because of decreased consumption, primarily in the residential and commercial classes. Total operating expenses are also under budget, coming in at $2.8 million, or 49% of budget. They are favorably comparable to last year. So net income before transfers trails the budget at $1.7 million, or 42% of budget.
Question.
Yes.
The February's consumption is not going to be that high. Are there any reason to be concerned about the budget on this item?
The gas fund is already in a profitable state. It's hard to say. I don't think it'd be an issue. Typically, we do have some good sales in the spring. I don't anticipate any problems right now.
Mike, following up on that, we're about 1,000 behind on gross profit and about 100,000 ahead on expenses compared to last year. maybe you just addressed that, but has anybody made any projections? Are we going to be able to catch up? We're about $500,000 behind on net income.
I have not done any projections. It's something we can certainly look at.
We're starting to get to the warmer period, so
Right.
we may carry that all the way through then.
Good. To the gas recovery, was under recovery at a little over $660,000 at the end of January. Any other questions on gas? Moving on to page 12, the electric fund. The electric fund reports operating revenues of $63 million. That slightly trails the budget at 55% of budgeted levels and reflects a 7% decrease from last year. Again, if we exclude the PCA recovery line item, operating revenues actually show a slight increase of 1%. Purchase power costs are in line with sales, also at 56% of budget. Overall consumption was compared to last year, year to date, and down 9% if you compare just January to January. Total operating expenses in the electric fund of $9.6 million are at 55% of budget, and they are in line when compared to sales volume. The fund reports net income before transfers of $5.5 million and a net loss after transfers of just under $300,000. And again, as we've mentioned in the past, the write-off of $2 million of the PCA is what's causing this net loss for the year. If you took that out of the effect, we would have a profit of a little over $1 million.
Mike, not accounting for the $2 million, comparing to last year, we're about $400,000 down in gross profit and $300,000 ahead in expenses. Same question, that's $700,000. Are we going to catch up, or are we going to be able to offset with some reduction in expenses? Somebody needs to be looking at that.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, just to echo the commissioner's comments, I'd asked for some analysis on the PCA and provided some. I did not get that till late this weekend, so I did not provide feedback till this afternoon. Clearly not satisfied at this point with an understanding of how that PCA is affecting our profitability. Because, you know, if we think about the fact that I'm assuming when we budget, we budget no change in the PCA. Is that true?
We budget for the effect of the PCA. We do budget.
So do we? So let me look at this a little bit. Hopefully, you can answer this.
Sure.
So do we budget any delta at all in the PCA in a given year based upon a forecast?
Yes, there is a PCA component of the revenue budget.
Okay.
The way to look at the PCA, there's a portion. Of course, we have a base rate. In a perfect world, the base rate would cover our purchase power cost.
Right.
So the PCA is there for any variance. Right now, we are under-recovered, as we all know. There's a receivable on the balance sheet. So on any given month, the amount that we collect because of the PCA rate would first go to cover any excess cost that we have for that month. If there's additional revenue left over from that, that gets applied to the balance sheet and reduces that PCA receivable.
Right.
And this kind of gets into the summary or the analysis of our projected change in the PCA receivable as to what has happened. That's basically based on three things. And in the handouts, I think I provided a copy at your desk as well today. The first component of that projection is AMP's forecast of our needs, how much they will be billing us and how much kilowatt hours we will be taking from them. The other thing to consider is when I was looking at that, is our loss factor. That's an estimate as to what our loss factor will be. So that can come into play if it's more than we thought. That will impact how much we can recover from the PCA. And then the third thing to remember is the billings from AMP are a true month. We're getting ready to pay our purchase power bill from AMP for February, and it is the entire month of February.
Sure.
Now our customers, of course, their meters are read all throughout the month. If your meter is read on the 15th of each month, we have not billed you. We've only billed you for half of your February consumption. The rest of your February consumption will be on your March bill. So in a period like we are right now, where kilowatt hour consumption is increasing, and And we've had an increase from November to December, from December to January, and I don't know what February looks like yet. Anytime we have that increasing consumption, we're always going to have that timing difference where we're not going to pull in enough PCA revenue. We're always going to be waiting until the consumption starts to slide down in the spring, and we'll make up some difference there. So those, just on the analysis that we did, those are three things to keep in mind when looking at the PCA and how well it's recovering compared to forecasts.
So, and I'm just looking at it a little differently. You know, first off, just to clarify me, because this is very complicated, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand it. And my concern is about cash generation and cash flow. So you understand my concern.
Right.
Now, our budget, we applied a $2 million write-off. Now, is that write-off included in our current budget analysis that's on this page?
That does reflect the $2 million write-off.
Okay, so when I look at our target net income for the year of $500,000, that is inclusive of that write-off?
Yes.
Okay. So that answers that question. So that makes me more concerned than I was. So if we look at where we're at year to date, and we look at the over-recovery that we have had, the recovery that we've had this year to date, which is about $3.3 million after accounting for the write-off. And we look at where we are in terms of what I would call, let's call it an adjusted net income. So if we look at the line item for January of 2016, which says we're at about $5.869 million in operating income. All right? January 2016, this number right here. Well, the fact is that reflects a positive change in the power cost adjustment of $3.32 million.
Let me point this out.
Let me finish. Okay? That means our adjusted net income after crediting for power cost adjustment is $2.16 million. That was a question I was trying to get an answer to last month, and I really would like that answer. And I would like to be in a position where we really understand how much cash we're generating out of our current pricing structure and our current cost structure as we move into rate analysis next year. I am concerned we're not generating enough cash in this business. I'm concerned that we're thinking about taking on debt that we may not be able to cover. So I really would like, and even perhaps a working session, so we really understand the profit and loss, the balance sheet, and have an ability to predict better where we're going to be. Because we're definitely behind where I thought we should be after you've answered the fact that there's the $2 million adjustment is in the current budget numbers. That's true. And I'm a little, very concerned as we're moving forward that we've actually budgeted properly. That's my concerns.
I guess what I follow, yes, if we had not written off $2 million of the PCA, our net income bottom line would be $2 million higher. So we would have net income after transfers of $1.8 million, let's say.
Yep.
The recovery that we have experienced this year, separate from the $2 million write-off, is strictly a conversion, if you will, of that PCA receivable to cash.
Right.
So I guess that's where you're headed. I'm trying to connect the dots here.
Right.
If we had not recovered any of the PCA, we would not have that.
If we hadn't recovered any of that PCA, we'd be losing a lot of money. And if we're flat for the remainder of the year, we're going to lose money.
As far as recovery goes, you're saying if we fail to recover any more.
I mean, we're living off recovery right now to stay positive, it appears. It appears. I don't know. That's what, I think we would like to have that answer.
Okay.
So you follow where I'm trying to get at? Just to really understand, because again, there is no associated cost on the balance sheet we transfer. We're just transferring over a receivable in cash.
That's right. All the PCA is doing is changing that receivable to cash. That's right. Okay.
Now, let me ask a follow-up question. When I look at this PCA recovery template, is that what you're using as the monthly PCA adjustment
Yes.
to the P&L?
The amount that we either recover or fail to recover, or the over or under recovery each month,
Right.
is the entry, if you will, to revenue and to that receivable. So if we under recover, the receivable goes up. The revenue also goes up because we're saying we're going to recover it in a future period, but we've earned it.
Right. But that takes into account, you called the excess cost when you started your definition, and the excess cost calculation is in these PCA analysis that we got this week, last week.
Yes, I mean, that shows...
That's where you're taking into account the loss factor and
Yes.
those other things. So we need to go back and kind of follow through that and get a clearer understanding of what these numbers mean and what these definitions are. I think that'd be very helpful to us as we move through what Mr. Donahue has suggested. We need a clearer understanding of this. And I agree with Mr. Donahue. At some point, we've got to figure out what kind of performance indicators we're using and tracking in order to make sure that we're keeping this utility sound and solvent for the long term. And it requires rate. We've got to get our price right. We've got to have our costs right. We've got to have our all of our costs, including our debt expenses, fixed expenses, and we've got to figure out if we're doing exactly what we should be doing in terms of using our bonding power, which is an issue we'll talk about in a minute. Does anybody else, Mr. Turpin?
Well, as I recall, when we raised the amount of unbalance that we can carry in the PCA, that question was raised, do we have significant cash flow to carry that and handle that without hurting the bond and debt? And that's when we raised that limit, if you felt you could handle that, right, Mike?
I'll say this, I have cash at the present. The budgets that are presented to you each year are a cash basis budget. The effect on cash, if you will, is what the budget shows you. And each year that effect on cash is a slight increase or flat. So under those assumptions, under those facts, I would say that the operation, as long as it is according to budget, will produce enough cash to maintain at least where we are. So, and those cash budgets they factor in the debt service for that year, whatever capital replacement is included.
So I think my understanding is it's being watched and controlled on that.
I think it's very complicated right now, and it's at a level of complication we've never dealt with before, which is why I'm asking some more detailed questions than normally I would. I mean, we've done this on gas for years. Right. We understand the gas business. I feel, we're not going to have a good year in gas, but that's the way it is. Within the electric utility, we also are in a position where our portfolio has rising increases. We're getting ready to provide some preferential treatment for our large industrials. This has gotten very complicated. So I just believe it probably requires a little bit more level of fidelity.
It is, and it's my plan to bring this back in April. We have a new set of eyes looking at this.
That would be good.
There's a number of factors that will be affecting our supply starting this summer with capacity, with the hydro debt coming online. We're already seeing in January's invoice, so we need to have a better look at that, and April's my plan to bring that and recommendations to this commission.
I think that would be great to see. Thank you.
Is anybody else? Any other questions for Mr. Atkins? Mr. Atkins, I'm not going to talk about debt capacity today. We're going to talk about that in April because it's going to come together in a better place, and we're going to make sure the commissioners get some information that they haven't received yet that I've kind of looked at, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
If you allow me to, I think telecommunications was the only one we had not covered. The telecommunications.
Oh, I'm sorry, telecommunications, right. Go ahead.
That's on page 13. The operating revenue came in at $956,000 through the end of January, which is on target at 58% of our budget. You'll see our purchase services are running ahead of budget at 69% and show an increase of 15% compared to last year. Administrative expenses are under budget at 47%. Administrative expenses are up a little bit due to the depreciation again. Fund reports net income after transfers of $294,000, representing 86% of our budgeted expectation for this year. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item is a presentation from Severn Trent, the good folks that operate our wastewater treatment facility for us. And this is Mr. Shoup.
That's right.
Jerry Shoup. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Did you bring us a check today? Did you bring us you bring us a check about this time, or is it later on in the summer?
It's later on in the presentation.
We appreciate you when you bring your checks because we know you're doing a great job of saving money for us. So
Right.
we appreciate that.
We do everything that we can to try to save the city of Danville money. Thank you all for allowing me to come and talk about all of the successes that we've had this year. We being the city of Danville and Severn Trent. We consider our relationship as a partnership. The word contractor I don't like it. So it lends a connotation there that we're not working together to me, and maybe you all don't feel that way, but it's just one of the things that I try to stay away from. So topics today: facility improvements, compliance accomplishments, community involvement, cost savings accomplishments. That's where we'll talk about, Mr. Smith, maybe some of your money, and priorities for 2016. Facility improvements. Install diversion basin bypass gates, diversion basin drain gate, 10-inch Gorman-Rupp pump at the south side facility, wiring and associated equipment for influent SCADA, influent RTU and install programming. That was custom controls. But their pricing was leveraged by Severn Trent. We didn't just bid it out. We basically sold custom controls and leveraged our pricing and the ability to use them in the region to drive costs down. So just get that out there. Installed a baffle curtain in number 4, secondary clarifier. Installed return activated sludge VFDs. That was triad automation. That was bid through the city, but there's some cost savings that we can talk about with that work too. Installed wiring and associated equipment with pipe gallery SCADA. I've got some pictures. We'll do a show and tell here in a minute after I get through the list. Overhaul, number 2 secondary clarifier. That was Lisbon Buildings and Infrastructure. That was the 4th of 4 clarifiers that the city has overhauled or rehabbed since 2011. Thank you for that. That improves our operation, improves our ability to stay in compliance. And compliance is why you have Severn Trent here. Okay? We understand that. Compliance is the number 1 priority. We'll talk about compliance too. Install baffle curtain on number 2 secondary clarifier. I'll discuss these baffle curtains a little bit. It's part of the process. Diversion basin gates. These were installed by Severn Trent personnel. City bought the equipment. This is a theme throughout the presentation. Due to our partnership, the city buys the equipment, we try to leverage pricing, and we install the equipment.
Can I ask you a question about
Sure.
that? So legally, how do you leverage pricing when the city's doing the procurement?
If it's bid out, we do not leverage pricing. There's as part of our contract, we have a maintenance cap, okay? Currently, $210,000. The maintenance cap items are the items that we leverage pricing. If it's bid out through the city and the city's procurement department, we have no
Okay, I just
no
wanted
part
to
in that.
clarify that.
Yeah.
All right.
I can see that's a good question. 10-inch Gorman-Rupp pump install. This was a significant job. I don't know I know of very few operating services, sales pitch coming, that can do this work with the existing people. Zero contractor. See, I can say contractor if it's a contractor that works for me. Zero, let's say subcontractor. Zero subcontractor work on this installation. The pictures really don't do the job any justice because it's a tight space. It's a total redesign of the pumping space. More reliable. This also saved the replacement of the pump, which the vertical style pump was another $20,000 to replace in kind. So the Gorman-Rupp suction lift pump saved money on equipment costs. And Severn Trent did the work. Influent pump station SCADA infrastructure. Any of you all electricians doing electrical work? It's hard to take a picture of electrical work to show the amount of work that actually is involved with this. If you count the wires, just know that every wire was pulled through conduit, some of it replaced. And for 2015, our SCADA cost for infrastructure equipment that came off the maintenance cap, $22,000. Severn Trent did the work for $9,000. Usually, labor is half or equal to parts. So around 38% of the equipment costs. Here's some graphics from the Influent pump station SCADA system. 6 Influent pumps that can be operated automatically, resequenced, increases the performance of the Influent pumping station. 2 diversion basin valves that were replaced. The problem with the diversion basin valves, when the operators, it becomes a safety issue because the times that the operators need to utilize these valves are in the worst conditions. It's raining, lightning. Sure. So now they can operate these valves with a click of a mouse. Southside pump station and sludge holding tanks, SCADA graphics. Southside pumping station with the pumps, bar screen, and the decant from the biosolids basins. And the sludge holding tanks. Return activated sludge VFDs. City bid out the VFDs, lowest price for the VFDs. Severn Trent cleaned the cabinets, sanded them, repainted them, saved the city $8,000. That's just what we do. I get opportunity to brag about it a little bit today, but that's just, when it comes down to it, that's what you pay us to do. But there's the numbers. Number 2, secondary clarifier overhaul. I didn't have a really good before picture, so you got a during on that one, and the after shows the work that Lisbon Buildings and Infrastructures did for the city of Danville. Like I said before, this is the 4th clarifier of 4 that the city has replaced, and it's helped us operate the facility. To go along with the overhaul of the clarifier, Severn Trent installed curtains around the outside of the clarifier. The peripheral feed clarifiers, and they require a baffle. It's the previous baffles were fiberglass with metal frames, and the wastewater comes in to the outside of the clarifier and it flows down in to the clarifier. Well, the curtain keeps short or uneven flow across the clarifiers from happening. So Mr. Dunkley came up with this idea for the curtain. Not sure of the cost savings, but it's a vinyl curtain that's hung on stainless steel anchors, and it's replaced quite a bit of fiberglass and stainless flat bar. So that's really good cost savings. Just another example of the partnership. Compliance. Like I said before, this is what you pay us for. Everything that I talk about today is rolled into this topic. 100% compliance for the last 4 years. 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015. That's not the easiest thing to do. There are 260 sample points each month that we could potentially violate the permit. I usually don't do math in public, so 260 times 12. Okay. How do we ensure compliance? Timely and transparent communication of potential issues to the city. Even the smallest issues are discussed. Beat around, data is provided. Good decisions are made with the city's money. We promote and engage workforce that owns a compliance streak. Our folks watch the data. If we start to trend up on one of our compliance parameters, they are all over. Maintenance folks, operations folks, lab folks. They own the streak, and we promote that. Strict adherence to process control plan and key process indicators. Severn Trent's developed a process control plan for the wastewater plant, and we stick to it. We have KPIs that we monitor to show how we are performing against the process control plan. Annual preventive maintenance on basically all of the large vessels, the aeration basins, the clarifiers, secondary clarifiers, and the primary clarifiers. The city has spent a lot of money on these assets. We understand that you would like to keep them running. We take them down at least once a year and do an inspection and fix the small things before they turn into large items. Continuous improvement to the preventative maintenance processes. We don't rely on a mechanic's memory. We don't rely on an operator's memory. We have a computerized maintenance management system. It's called JobCal Plus. We utilize that system to ensure that we perform the preventive maintenance on the city's equipment. The preventive maintenance work orders are reviewed. The mechanics ensure that they meet the equipment's requirements. Not what the employees' requirements are, or what Severn Trent requirements are, what the equipment requires. Community involvement. All of our employees are from this region. I relocated from Blacksburg to this region. I've been here 4 years. I'm a part of the community. Some of the things that we sponsor and help to continue. The Duke MBA grad rugby tournament. It's coming up in April again. A lot of money comes into Danville from this tournament. I wish it was more, but that's something that we sponsor. God's Storehouse Backpack for Kids. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but during the summer on Fridays, they pack a backpack for some of the children, and they have that food for the weekend. Dare Day at the Braves Park. Really proud of this one. We were the sole sponsor for this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. Danville Children's Festival. Salvation Army Angel Tree. See a theme? We like kids. Rugby Tournament 2015. I asked for a rugby rule book. One of the officials said, I can't give you a rule book because it's a law book. So, yeah, I know, they take it serious. Violent, it's very violent. Here's the Dare Day at the Braves Park. Like I said, we're the sole sponsor for this. Middle school students from Danville were in attendance. They got to see some dog exhibitions, and they heard a presentation about drug abuse resistance. Danville Children's Festival. Lots of good activities for the kids. Salvation Army Angel Tree. This is our maintenance group. Made a donation to that good cause. Here you go, Mr. Smith. Cost savings. This is the prime example of our partnership here in Danville. Back in 2014, we started talking about an anoxic system for the treatment processes. One of the things that Severn Trent likes to pride itself on is that we take existing equipment, make some minor modifications to optimize the performance of the operations. Sometimes there's cost savings, sometimes it's flat, but either way, it's going to improve the operation of the facility. So, we had a trial in early 2014 to test the system's ability to have this anoxic system. Basically, the anoxic system is a part of the process that you can use to select a bacteria that works for you. The bacteria, in the process of converting nitrate and nitrites, they release alkalinity. One of the process chemicals that we were adding was lime. If you look at the lime costs from 2011 to 2015, you can see the usage. And the usage now is down to zero, basically a $75,000 cost savings. The other part of the anoxic system, it reduces the amount of air needed for the system, which is energy. The bacteria utilize an oxygen molecule in the nitrate nitrite that's created in the nitrification part of the aeration basin. And basically, what happens, zero air, then you feed air, and that's a nitrification process. So by modifying the equipment, you see that the city bought the parts, Severn Trent labor and pricing, and this was part of our maintenance cap. Engineering estimates were $330,000 for this change. Parts and labor, $35,000. So $295,000 installation cost savings. And it continues, just changing this process continues to reap benefits for the city. Energy reduction. You can see since 2011, we've gradually decreased energy at the wastewater plant. We being the city and Severn Trent. The installation of the aeration system in 2012 was a big energy saving. In early 2012, there were, I guess, the 8 100 horsepower mixers were deleted from the system, and the blowers, diffused air system was installed. So that's a lot of the energy savings. But if you notice in the graph, November, January, March, each year there are peaks. That's basically heating the buildings and that kind of thing. You can see that the peaks have diminished as well. And one of the things we've done is taken on the heating cost for the city as far as managing that. Turn the thermostat down. It's something you should do. There's the results. Cost savings rebate. Due to continued savings from the ANOC system and 2014 permit changes, the city's been rebated $60,000 again for 2015. There's your check, Chairman Smith. I would have brought another one, a live check, but the last one ended up in my office. So as another cost savings initiative, there's your check. Here's some historical cost savings, just real quickly to run through these since 2009. Optimized biosolids removal saved $141,000. Replaced MCC with the existing employees, saved $20,000. That MCC was destroyed in a hurricane. One of the flooding from a hurricane. 2010, worked with city engineers to increase capacity of aeration basin 13%. That's worth somewhere around $7.8 million in today's construction costs. The actual capacity increase, I think, was 13,000. Installed isolation gates on chlorine contact tanks. Installation cost estimates were $120,000. Severn Trent completed for $40,000. 2 non-potable water systems reduced to 1. Energy cost savings estimated to be $40,000 annually. That's using 10 cents per kilowatt. Designed and installed upgraded chlorine and sulfur dioxide gas feed system. Cost to replace the existing evaporators was $150,000. Severn Trent completed this work for $20,000. Performed ANOX system trial and implemented full-scale operation. Talked about that a little bit. Engineering estimates, $330,000. Our partnership got the total down to $35,000. Optimum operation of ANOX system resulted in 0 spent for lime, and $60,000 was rebated back to the city for 2014 and 2015. Priorities for 2016. Preventive maintenance to number 1 and number 2 aeration basins. Hypochlorite life cycle costs and analysis. Installation of 3 remaining secondary scum pumps. SCADA pipe gallery RTU install and programming, that's already done. SCADA additions for the wastewater treatment plant and the pumping station across the river. Replace 2 influent pumps, replace 2 RAS pumps. Replace 4 18-inch RAV valves. Installation of RAS valve vault. That job's been bid out. Installation of new chlorine analyzers. Installation of new chlorinators. Influent piping replacement. That job's been bid out. RAS piping repair and selective replacement. That work's going on now. Installation of new bottom flights and chains on number 1 and number 2 primary clarifiers. Estimate that sometime this fall. with using maintenance cap monies. Question? Yes, sir.
The 80% reduction in nitrates and nitrates, was that a mandate by EPA or Clean Water?
We've got a permit requirement for 25 milligrams per liter for a total killed all nitrogen, or TKN. Actually, it was a benefit of using the anoxic system. It's seen as a green, at this point for Danville, it's seen as a green initiative.
The reason why I ask, and you may not, I mean, this may be out of your expertise, I don't know, but is it the nitrites and the nitrates that are partially blamed for algae growth in rivers and tributaries?
Nitrogen. Nitrogen.
Okay. So this wasn't necessarily required, but Severn Trent did extra removal of nitrates and nitrates.
Oh, yeah. Pit limit is 25 for TKN, and we average below 5. For ammonia, which is the toxic portion, we average less than 0.1, and our permit limit's 13. That's the added benefit of, during the conversion, nitrogen is released as gas as the bacteria use the nitrates and nitrites.
Go ahead.
Two things. Well, three things. First, I see you've got 14 items in your plan for next year,
Yes, sir.
and that you completed 10 last year. At least
Right.
that's what you highlighted.
Right.
What was your plan? Was your plan last year to hit 10? Did you hit 10 out of 10? What was the plan?
The plan last year, and just so you know, this work is in addition to all of the preventative maintenance
Right.
and the smaller corrective work that
This
we
is
do.
more your project-related
Right.
activities. Right?
We did not set a number that we wanted to meet. We knew what we needed to get done, and we wanted to do it. I didn't count 10 items and say, okay, we're going to get 10 completed.
Okay.
We always have a part in our report on the radar. These are the things that are coming up that we need, that are going to be a priority. I don't count them. If you had asked me before that how many I had last year, I couldn't have said that.
It's still very impressive. You know, the return you've provided. The city is demonstrable. Speaking of return, have you come back to the city and actually provided us a return on investment that you've been able to provide the city through this partnership, based upon the investment that the city has made in your services above and beyond our prior costs for operating the unit?
We have not provided a return on investment. We have communicated cost savings. That is something that we could put together.
I would be very interested in seeing that, what type of return you've been able to provide to the city through what I would call your extraordinary actions.
Right.
I think that would be very beneficial to know. And the third thing is, I was interested in the fact that you have very detailed process control plans and KPIs. And one of the things that I'm personally concerned about is the fact that we do have chlorinators down there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a high usage area for recreation. We've talked about that previously. I thought perhaps we were looking at replacing those, and I see we're installing 2 new chlorinators.
Right. We, Mr. Duncan, are discussing upgrading to liquid hypochlorite facilities.
Okay.
This previous year, we actually completed a trial of peracetic acid. We did a 30-day trial, and we were going to move to a 60-day trial. And the cost just did not work out. It was too expensive. One of the items listed to work on for 2016 is the hypochlorite life cycle cost analysis, number 2 on the list. There will be significant costs to upgrade, and
It's fine. So the fact that, I mean, you are operating an operation that chemically
Right.
is, if I was back in my chemical plant days, that's an operation that would have a full hazards and operability analysis around it, a full failure modes effect analysis as part of the process control plan because of the hazards associated with an out-of-control situation. Is that actually in place? Is that the methodology that's used?
Yes, well, the methodology and the terminology we use is a process safety management plan.
Okay, PSM. Yep.
And a risk management plan.
All right.
I update that yearly in conjunction with the city's hazmat team. We actually had all of the fire department visit January, and they were given training, updated information about the facilities, lots of good communications back and forth, some things that we could do to improve their response, things that they could do to improve their response.
So all things aside, okay, the fact that it does potentially cost more, there's a cost and then there's a calculated risk.
Yes.
And I do believe it's important that we work with your organization, along obviously with Barry and his team. I'd like to see that analysis brought forward.
Okay.
So that this group can make that decision.
Right. Okay.
Because you know what? It may cost more, but if we drive the probability of an incident, into parts, opportunities per billion versus wherever we're at today, I think that may be something this body would be willing to support.
Right. And we share the same concerns. One of the bigger cost savings was actually one of the elimination of one of the biggest safety risks. The evaporators that were on the chlorine system were pressurized. Now you're at a gas feed system, so that any loss of vacuum, you're not leaking.
You're not leaking.
The evaporators and the welded piping that was in place, I guess from 1976, was in dire need of replacement.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. When I first came to Danville, that was one of the things that kept me up. Especially when we had the rugby tournament, that turns into an international, a huge leak there turns into an international incident.
Well, and the other thing is, with the trails that we have, the mountain bikes, the fact that we have folks who are up in the woods, God knows where on the trail. And again, we really have to think about the impact of just one incident.
That's right. You're right. And we are definitely on the same page. We started discussions this last spring.
Good.
And we went through the effort of completing the peracetic acid trial, which is another form of disinfection.
It kind of reminds me of when we accelerated the removal of our lead laterals in our water piping system years and years ago, thank goodness. All we have to do is look at one in this case, mistake made by a city, and look where they're at now.
That's right.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done.
Anybody else? Mr. Shoup, thank you very much for your comprehensive report. Thank you for your good work, and thank all you people.
Okay.
You all do a great job for us, and we really do appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is the continuation of the fund transfer policy discussion. Mr. Atkins. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Mr. Gray? Okay, fine. Go ahead, Mike.
Just to kick off the discussion this month, I went back and provided you some history as to where the transfers have been in the past and where they are today. Ironically, I found a letter between the finance director and city manager from 18 years ago having a similar discussion about the lack of a policy, the need for a policy, and perhaps it should be based on return on fixed assets or net fixed assets. It's a little ironic that I ran across that. But I provided you history every 10 years, starting with 1960, and then every year, starting with 2010, forward for each of the funds. Mr. Turpin and I were discussing before the meeting today about wastewater and water. I have not found any verbiage to go along with the numbers as of yet. He was remembering perhaps that years ago, water and wastewater operated at a break-even goal. And perhaps if there was excess money, that was transferred to the general fund. I did find situations where the general fund did send money, at least to water or wastewater. I'm thinking in cases of years where that did not break even. But again, I need to research that further, more so than we have the last couple of weeks. I've also put feelers out to other localities to get an idea of what they're doing. I believe we did this a few years ago when we established the policy that we have. But I was going to see if I can get some current information. I have not gotten any back yet. We may maybe ask AMP if they can poll the members and get some information for next month as well. So this was just for historical information and to sort of kick off your discussion today.
Mr. Shanks.
And I know you have not from just putting this together, but as a bean counter, do you have any feeling about whether the appropriate method or an appropriate method of transfer would be a fixed rate, 6.3, 6.4, versus a fluctuating rate?
Yeah, I did give that some thought. Oddly, the letter I'm referring to 18 years ago said that perhaps we should look at something around 10% of a return on next.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure we're at the right number, but
right. Just off the cuff, your expected rate of return changes over time. Perhaps back in the 1970s or 80s, people would expect to receive more. I'm thinking of CD rates. Used to be double digit.
Yeah.
That's unheard of now. So I don't know to tell you the truth, whether a fixed rate is reasonable over a long period of time. But certainly an expected rate of return. I think you'd be safe saying somewhere between 5 and 8% if you wanted to set something permanently.
The program that we currently have in place has a trigger where you can and can't make the transfer or increase the transfer, but it can never decrease. It seems like if you continue to increase, if your mechanism is set up to always increase, it seems like that number, the rate of return or whatever you want to call it, will continue to always increase.
That's true. If you did propose a policy where there was a cap, say 10%, theoretically there could be years in the future where it's affordable to contribute 10% of net fixed assets to the general fund. And then obviously if that investment in net fixed assets does decrease over years, or if there's more depreciation than there is new assets, new investment in fixed assets, then that contribution would decrease if there was a cap, say 10%, 8%, whatever it might be. Just from the information, I'll point out a couple of things. Fiscal 2012, that was the year that additional monies were sent to the governmental funds for economic development. There was an extra $1 million contributed from electric, gas, and water in 2012. That's why you see a spike there.
$1 million from each,
electric and water.
Was there a $3 million appropriation from the electric fund?
It was $1 million from each of those three funds.
There's a lot of good too.
What? Okay, that number changed during the budget process, or do you remember? It seemed to me that. Are you sure that's what we found was the final?
That was the final.
Okay.
It may have been proposed $3 million all out of electric at the beginning. I'm just going on a shadowy memory, but I think that's right.
A question, sir?
Go ahead.
So, and perhaps this is fine. Perhaps this has been provided us to before, and if it has, forgive me. If we were to look at the basis for the transfer and compare the transfers that are currently being executed versus investor-owned utilities and other municipalities in the Commonwealth of Virginia, how would we compare?
On a fund-by-fund basis, I mean, we're ranging most recently for fiscal 2015, I believe gas was our highest at 7.5%, and and our lowest being wastewater at 1.3%. I don't know.
That would be helpful if we
Yeah,
had.
I can certainly look into that. I can talk to-
And, I think we went through a lot of this as we were looking at rates, and perhaps we already have that information available, but,
I think, didn't Jason, didn't you have some of that for the steering committee?
not on this basis.
We didn't have Virginia municipalities, we had investor-owned, but I can get that from MEPAV, our municipal electric utilities of Virginia.
If it's not too much effort.
And
It would help make an apples-to-apples comparison.
I think at the time, the takeaway was that we were in the ballpark, but we were on the high side of average, maybe.
We also received, there was some data that we were given by Hometown. I think it was in that Hometown survey examination they did, which included a wider geographical area, included the whole East Coast, and I think. It gave some of that information.
Came from the APPA document.
Right, yeah. Let me go back and follow on what Mr. Donahue said. You were talking about comparing to returns on investment from IOUs. I believe that was a question. I'm not hearing very well today. Please make sure that we understand that the return on investment to Danville Power and Light, the operating company, is what the IOU would seek from the State Corporation Commission, not the dividend,
Right.
if you will, that the shareholders, in this case the city of Danville, would receive from the operating profit, because I believe it's going to change your number.
Okay.
And it's also going to bring you to begin thinking about, based on the earlier conversation we had today, about whether or not we're generating enough income to create that dividend payment to our shareholder, and we're not just returning capital, which is an issue that from time to time IOUs get in trouble with, and it creates a lot of angst in the investing community. If you want to say that you're going to treat Danville Power and Light like it was an IOU, then you need to kind of deal with some of those realities of managing it that way. I just want to point that out, and I think we need to, if we're going to do a comparison of IOUs, we need to look at the profit, not just what the dividend is,
Right.
because it's a difference. And going back also, I'm not sure, we have talked before about this, but I've never had a clear answer. When you're talking about the in lieu of taxes, you would receive some tax revenue from the electric company if it was not owned by the city of Danville.
True.
Is that right?
There would be.
Could you kind of give us a summary of what types of taxes there would be, what would be taxed, how you would
Bottom
that
line,
revenue?
bottom line it. If this was if this was an investor-owned utility, what would the tax bill be each year?
And exactly what types of items, poles and
gonna be on-
TPP
it's on the
and
fixed
real
assets.
property and
Right.
and
Current value.
is there is a transaction tax. There's a sales tax that we pay on our utility bills, right?
There's a locality tax on
Right,
consumption.
and that does not discriminate between an IOU and a municipally owned. That's that's a state tax on a transaction. Okay. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
We're looking for a description and some kind of ballpark number about what those tax revenues might be.
We can
At
look
least
through
That
that.
would be helpful too.
At least for me, it's a 2-point. It allows us to make comparisons under two sources. First, percentage-wise as a fixed assets, how much are we contributing versus other municipal utilities? And then the second one is, if we were an investor-owned utility, would they be paying an equivalent amount more or less in tax revenue to the city?
We can, that's easily done on real estate. The plant property and equipment gets a little harder because we don't have assessed values, but if we use our net fixed asset value. then we
Yeah.
get-
Right, because that's what we're using.
That's a great
What we're using now. So
approximation.
you can-
You can assign a reasonable value, and we're going to take that. I mean, we know it's not going to be perfect.
And I think the chairman knows a little bit about this, so he could probably help you from a former life.
Well, okay, let's move. Yes, Mr. Turpin. Thank you, sir.
If I recall, the steering committee looked at some of that data, and Mike can try, but I believe going to municipal operation, they don't really look at the return on net fixed assets in terms of their contribution, and it was hard to get that information. You can get it for a private industry from the State Corporation Commission. Usually it's running around 11, 12%. So just keep that in mind. And taxes is over and above the return on net fixed assets. So Danville's being very conservative when you consider that and look at these percentages. And perhaps I was more familiar with the gas and electric, but since the water and wastewater used to be a break-even analysis, and they're pretty low, you probably won't, if we do set a cap, which was my suggestion, we probably want to set the water and wastewater at a lower level than the gas and electric. And the other thought I had was due to the fact that even though we may set the electric at a reasonable rate, we may not want to go to that level for a while, because we're looking at we're still trying to get rid of a lot of high-cost electricity, and it's going to take a while to get that down, and the PCA is going to go up, so to minimize the effect on the customers. We just still may want to hold this contribution down, even though we could go higher theoretically because of that.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry.
As Mr. Turpin was just talking about the various funds, it seems like the utility, the telecommunications fund and electric fund may be in a similar range. And of course, I know telecommunications is a young industry for us, but can we look at that as well? How detrimental, if they were in similar rate of returns, how detrimental would telecommunications competition in the market be?
Yes, let's make sure we include that. Do we want to look at the gas too while we're doing this?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And the gas too? For sure. Okay. Gas is a big number. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say about this?
Well, I think, probably the biggest concern I know I have is the fact that if in any business, if we're running into profit difficulty, we have the ability, if we're in a business, to reduce the return to our shareholders. And I think the wording in this current policy is, quite frankly, what's troubling to us. What City Council chooses to do, upon the advice of the city manager, is up to them. But I think this body feels that it's constrained in terms of its ability to make a good recommendation given the current wording.
I'll take that a step further. I don't believe the current policy came as a recommendation from here. Is that correct? I believe it was not. Was it vetted here or not?
Let me say what my remembrance of it is when we were doing it. But part of the remembrance that I have of it was that the city council, after we had done our budget, made some appropriations from the restricted fund balances of the utilities in order to finance, I believe you said, economic development issues. It has been described variously as blight eradication, downtown, river district, or economic development. I've seen it characterized as different things. But those appropriations from the utility fund unrestricted balances were made after this body passed the budgets. there was some conversation in the utility commission after that where the city wanted to have a better idea of what they were going to do. And I know I talked to the then finance director and to the city manager too. And they wanted to be able to have some kind of inflator in the number where it would go up over time. And to me, I didn't think it was a bad idea at the time because I felt like that the trade was they would not go in to our budget and appropriate from the unrestricted fund balance of the utilities after we had spent all our time doing a budget because they needed another $1 million. At least they could have some predictability about what that number was going to be. I'm sorry I'm being wordy, but I'm trying to make the point is that the city administration felt like that they needed a sure path to have a number, an amount of money funding the general fund that they could rely that would go up over time. And they were, and they seemed to be happy with it.
Okay, and my original question is, though, they did not come to the utility commission for this policy. They went to city council, if I remember correctly.
I believe you're right because it came back to us, and I remember Mike's predecessor came and gave us a presentation, and it was on the agenda, and of course we voted yes because that's what we
right. And now
all we did.
And that's my point. Now I know for me as a member of city council, I was leery of the policy to begin with, but I didn't understand it. And if I was a utility commission member as well and didn't understand it, then I am sure a number of council members did not understand it either. Sure. And that's why it's so important, I think, now for us, after being 2-3 years into this, that we make the appropriate recommendation to council, whatever the policy is, but we do have a better understanding of the policy.
Mr. Turpin?
What I remember is that I was suggesting to go to a percentage on net fixed assets to guide, and they came up with this method. It's sort of a hybrid. It's using net fixed asset, the increases, to guide how much it would go up. And they just came in and sort of explained that to us. And I was always a little concerned. I didn't know long-term how that pattern would work out. And I expressed that to several, but that's the way it went.
You're right. I appreciate you remembering that. So that's where we are with that. And so I appreciate you understanding that. We need to make sure that we think about some comparison of this tax component of the cost of running Danville Power Line. Okay? Does anybody else have anything? Thank you, Michael.
Just to be clear, we'll be looking at comparisons with other investor-owned. We'll also be looking at the tax revenue that would be there if it were not.
Right.
And some municipalities if possible.
Yeah.
All right.
Jason, I'm sure, will be consulting with you about this. Thank you very much,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Our next item of business is customer service projects. Ms. Evans is going to come and talk to us.
I wanted to give you some information on several projects that we were working on. One of them that's familiar to you is my e-account. That's not a project we're working on, but just to give you an update on that. Currently, we have about 7...
Excuse me, meter, is this it?
That's one of them. That's the last one.
This is one of the handouts. Go ahead.
On the My E-account, currently we have about 7,500 customers who are enrolled in My E-account, and it's about 1,700 of them who have registered for e-bills. When they get the electronic bills, there is no need for a printed hard copy of the bill. So presently we're saving about $9,600 in printing and mailing cost in those bills.
Cool.
In cooperation with the Power and Light Division and IT, we are coordinating with an enhanced customer portal that will be more robust than the one that we have now. Customers will be able to access their reads almost real time, as well as make payments seamlessly with our payment processor. This is in the early phases, and it will involve interfaces with the Operation Management System, which is OMS, with CIS, which is our system, GIS, and also with the IVR system. We're in the early stages of, the early late stages, I guess, of a software upgrade to our CIS Infinity. We went live from Legacy with CIS in 2008, and we had an upgrade in 2011. About every 3 to 5 years, we look at the system that we're operating on and any upgrades that the vendor will present to us. And currently, we'll be going to version 4, which is on the front end of it, it's not too much difference. We still have the same functionality and enhancements that we currently have, but on the back end with the operating system, there are quite a few improvements. A lot of the programming has changed, so we expect to see a lot of efficiencies with the operating of the system. So we're excited about that. This is probably a 4 to 5 month implementation. We're converting all of our data again, not as much as we did from Legacy to CIS, but it's still quite a bit of conversion. So there's a lot of testing and training involved in it. So we hope to go live sometime mid to late May.
May I ask you a question about what you said so far? The portal interface online, is that the same time frame for completion, or what's the time frame for completion of that update?
I think that
This summer.
it's going to be this summer. That's
Summer.
a little more involved with different interfaces than just the CIS.
So if I hear you correctly, around August or September, all of these upgrades and interface
All things
updates
going.
should be
All
complete.
things going as, as
Assuming
planned.
it's smooth sailing, which it never
Right.
is, but we're looking
Right.
at August or September.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. And the last thing I want to report on is the meter audit. All of you have a slide a presentation in front of you, so I won't read each slide. But in 2009, if you remember, we went through the AMI, the automated metering infrastructure, where we replaced all of our 80,000 water, gas, and electric meters. Since that time, we've not had the need to physically go out to each location and read meters. So about the only time that we look at those meters is if we receive an alarm, or if by customer request, or by our audits, our billing exceptions, we have a reason to go out to a location. In 2015, we sent proposals out to have a meter audit check. True Check, which was the same contractor that installed the meters in 2009, was awarded that contract, and they hired local employees, temporary employees, to complete this project, which was from about July to December. We set a list of what we call abnormal operating conditions for each one of the services that we wanted the contractor to look at. We first wanted to make sure that the meter was operating properly, that there were no problems with connections, there were no problems with, especially in the gas, with corrosion or anything like that. They photographed each one of the meters that they went out and checked. And they also photographed the transformers and checked that there were no PCBs, that we had no PCB transformers still in service. All of the exceptions were reported, and customer service was involved to generate service orders to the respective meter shops so that they could go out and do that work. Of the issues found, I won't go through those, but on the electric side, we were looking especially to make sure that every meter that, according to our paperwork, our CIS and billing system, every meter that was at that location, there were sometimes where we found that the field work had not caught up with the paperwork. Most of those issues were found. We didn't see any stolen meters from other utilities or from our utilities. We wanted to make sure that the display was working. On the water and gas meters especially, there is a module that is supposed to be in sync with the meter reading. We wanted to make sure that all of those readings were in sync. We wanted to make sure that the meter box was secure at their location, meaning that it wasn't loose, that there were no loose wires or other operating abnormalities. In gas, we wanted to make sure there's some safety issues in gas, especially that we need to pay attention to. One of them is cast iron, the other is steel clamps. We wanted to check also for corrosion with the gas meters. And on the water meters, we wanted to make sure that the module was secure and also check for leaks. So the numbers of issues that were found are there. I'll be glad to answer any questions about anything.
Mr. Shanks.
What is the impact of a module not working? What happens to Danville Utilities when a module's not working?
If the module is not working, we likely will not get a read, or it's an incorrect read. The first thing we do in-house is check the actual meter, the reading that's on the meter. And then we send a crew, a technician out, either from water and gas or electric, to go out and actually check the meter, make sure that it's programmed correctly, and to get the right read.
So if the module's not working, was found to be not working during this study, Danville Utilities already knew that and was reading the meters themselves, or?
In most cases,
Were all
yes, sir.
meters, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that question. There's 700, almost 700 modules not working in gas and almost 500 not working in water. Those customers that had those modules were billed for something that they used, were they or were they not?
On the meter reading, yes, sir.
And that would have been a manual reading, probably.
We can access the reads from the meter as well as the module through Census, which is the software that picks up those reads from the antenna.
Okay.
So we can get them in-house. If for some reason we're not satisfied with the quality of that read, then we'll send an order down to the shop for the tech to check it out.
Mr. Nicholas?
Mr. Chairman, I have customer service questions, but they're not related to this presentation. Would you like me to wait until?
Yes, if you could.
I will.
I
That's
think
fine.
we want to, let's work through this data.
That's
I
fine.
believe we're going to need to. Thank you, sir. Go
So-
ahead, Mr. Turpin.
We've got service records, I assume for all water, gas, electric, which may be different than our meter records. Has anything have we ever matched those up to be sure every service is metered if it's active?
The service records and the meter records are in sync. Yes, sir.
Or what?
They are in sync. When we set up a customer's account, we set it up according to the services that are at the location and the meters that are attached for each service. Sometimes a customer will have part of the services turned on. For instance, they'll turn on the electric and water and not turn on the gas if it's not in season. But we still have record for the gas meter that's there at the location.
So we've got some services that will be no meter for gas, for instance, or electric.
The customer record would indicate if a meter had actually been removed for a particular service. Yes, sir.
May I ask what the E4000 display is? And if you told us, I apologize for asking again.
No, I didn't tell you. The E40,000 is kind of I don't know what the display is, but it prevents the customer from being able to see the actual meter read. It is a digital printout, and that's a display that they have to actually go out in the field to reset the meter using the software. It does not affect the meter read, it just affects the display.
Can I follow up on that? There were 891 issues.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because it did not work? You couldn't get the information out of it you wanted to, or?
We can get the information out of it that we need to. This is looking at the actual meter display. So we can get the information for the read that's stored in the meter. It's just that the customer cannot walk up to their meter and see their actual.
So what was the issue?
I'm not real sure.
They didn't work?
They work.
I believe it's a firmware issue with the meter, a firmware software issue with the meter.
Okay.
So they go out and reflash the meter.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's all they do to update.
Yeah.
It wasn't completely not working, it just needed to be rebooted.
It's just the way you view it when you walk up to the
was
meter,
still
what you're
sitting,
able
okay.
to see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything? I got one more question. The cast iron lid, that seems like a high percentage of issues for that particular area. Can you help me with that?
The cast iron lid is what was put on the meters before. As part of removing the cast iron piping, we're also trying to remove the cast iron lids. So that was one of the anomalies that we asked the crews to check for. Those meters that still had the cast iron lids on them, as well as those meters that had the steel clamps on them, so that we could go out and remove them.
So you replace them with material that is less dangerous?
That's correct.
And you knew when the True Check people went out, they were looking for this particular issue to identify it so it could be remediated?
Yes, sir.
You knew it was a problem?
Yes, sir. Or
Good,
likely a
good.
problem.
You knew it was, I'd hate to think you didn't know it was a problem and you found 2,600 of them, because that would have,
For each one of the
was a bit of a
services, we thought all of the things that might be out there in the field that we needed to correct, and for gas, that was 2 of them.
Mr. Nicholas?
I can wait if you want me to.
I think we're finished with, does anybody have any more questions? Are you finished?
Unless there are other questions concerning these projects.
And my questions are customer service related, following
Right.
up from last
Okay.
meeting.
Well,
not
I
this
think,
project.
does anybody have any more questions about this report? Are you finished with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Nichols, talk about customer service.
Was very pleased to see that we are eliminating the service charge for paying with a credit card online. Where are we on accepting credit and debit cards at point of sale at the Charles Harris Financial Center?
I'll have to let Mr. Atkins address that one.
All right. In the past, and it is currently true as well, MasterCard and Visa sort of dictate credit card regulations for most all the other credit cards. They pretty much follow suit. They do not allow you to charge a convenience fee face-to-face for transactions. Obviously, our cashiers at collections take utility payments and tax payments and other payments as well. At the time, the general fund is not in a position to absorb convenience fees for tax payments or other non-utility payments. In addition to the software changes and that type of thing that would have to take place in order for them to have a machine that they could hand the customer to scan a card, there would be some confusion if you're there to pay everything at once. For instance, you wouldn't be able to do that because it would be a separate transaction, one that the convenience fee is absorbed for utility payment, one where the tax payment convenience fee would have to be charged. Also, we cannot allow credit card information to pass over the city's server. That puts us at liability for maintaining protection of that information. There's PCI compliance issues. It entails an audit every year to make sure you're still PCI compliant. So those are some issues that we've dealt with and wrestled with in the past, is our decision not to go that route. We used to take Discover because Discover did allow us to charge a convenience fee face-to-face. Discover provided us a couple of machines. One was located downstairs, one was at the drive-through. Over time, those machines failed to continue working, and Discover, when asked to replace those, declined, basically because of sales volume. We may have had 3 or 4 Discover transactions every month or so. So I think that was their primary reason for not replacing those machines for us. So that's where we are today, to answer your question.
So is it your position that we will not be accepting credit cards at the Charles Harris Financial Center?
I'm hoping that eventually, as we start absorbing this fee for utility payments, and as the website for customers is available, I would love to see a kiosk at least located inside the lobby there, so that if you are physically in the building and wish to pay by credit card, there is an option there for you to do so, if you don't have that capability at home. So in the near future, I would hope that would be the case. In the prolonged future, if we can get to a point where we can absorb all credit card fees and make the changes that are needed, then yes, we could take credit cards at the counter for all transactions.
I mean, I guess this is a philosophical issue, but if I go to Target and Walmart and Amazon.com, I don't get charged a convenience fee for using a credit card. It just
and it's built into the price of the product that you're buying. So you are paying for it. It's just not outright part of your transaction.
Well, no, I mean, it's the same cost whether I pay cash or whether I pay.
Yes, I guess my point is, if they didn't take credit cards, the price of those goods would be lower. Is the point?
I don't know if I accept that premise, but anyway, it's a.
I think the Target still has to pay the credit card companies a portion of that. So
somebody's paying something somewhere. I'm not saying there's no fee involved. I'm saying that the customer isn't the one.
But it would be very clear cut for us if we started taking credit card payments for taxes, that there would be a cost to the city that would offset our revenue versus expenditure, and we'd have to make up for it in some way.
All right, fair point. Let's set that aside. The kiosk, what is the timetable on that?
I'm not fully aware. This is a project that involves IT and utilities. It really doesn't affect finance, but we're aware. I'm not sure what the timeline is.
It really revolves around the portal that Carolyn was mentioning, and really the scope around how we open up credit card. Do we allow industrial, commercial customers to use it, or just residential? We still need to talk about that. So we're still working our way towards that as the portal comes online later this summer. So we'll
Currently, you can pay with a credit card online, correct?
Yes.
And is that any major credit card, or is it only Discover?
It's any major credit card. It's a flat $3.75 per transaction. Your limit is $500. So if your utility bill is more than $500, you would actually have to log in twice.
Right, and that's what's been eliminated. Right.
That convenience fee will be eliminated, yes.
Has been or will be?
Will be.
July 1.
July 1. Okay.
For utility payments only.
Right.
Tax payments, it's a sliding scale. It's a percentage of the transaction is the convenience fee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Shanks?
So that elimination is taking place because of a change in vendor or a agreement for Danville Utilities to absorb that cost?
The decision for Danville Utilities to absorb that cost.
Anything else?
Other customers will pay it.
Thank you.
That'll be built in the rate.
Ms. Evans, are you finished?
Yes, sir. Unless someone has other questions.
Okay, I think we're fine. Well, thank you all very much for a nice, very informative presentation. Thank you. It's time for communications. Mr. City Manager.
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Utility staff, Ms. Evans?
No.
Alan?
No, sir.
Barry?
Just two things. One is we are still feeding cost at the water plant.
Barry?
Don't detect indication.
Excuse me, Barry, would you come up?
Come up.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Barry Dunkley. Two things. We're not having any taste and odor in the treated water at the water plant. We don't detect any odor in the raw water either, but we're still feeding carbon. Also, we're almost to the stage of submitting a grant application in the neighborhood of $500,000 to DEQ for a water quality study of the Dan and Smith rivers to address the taste and odor issue. And this is a combined effort on the part of the City of Danville and Halifax County Service Authority, as well as members of the Dan River Water Quality Coalition that we've established, which includes Martinsville, Henry County, Halifax County, St. Boston, and Danville, as well as the regulatory agencies. We should submit that this week, first of next week. And DEQ has been receptive to it at this point in time, so we hope it's a go thing for a grant. And Virginia Tech will be the one to do the work.
Any questions, Mr. Dunn?
I'll add that I've received positive feedback from DEQ about that grant application as well, and we look forward to being able to get started on that project and hopefully get some answers to some of the issues that we've been dealing with.
And we certainly need to use any influence that we may have with anybody connected with the state government, because after all, this is a state grant and it may do some good.
And I do appreciate Barrett and staff working on that, and Jason as well working on that grant application. Thank you.
The comments from commission members, Mr. Donahue.
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Shanks.
I'd just like to thank Everett Trent for being here this evening and making the presentation.
Mr. Turpin? No. Ms. Kane?
No.
Mr. Nicholas?
No, sir.
Don't have anything. Are there any members of the public that would like to have any comments? Thank you all for coming. Mr. Gray, send us out.
Just a couple of things. Prairie State, the participants will be voting on a lower rate because of the increased performance from Prairie State. So it will potentially drop the rate from $67.93 a megawatt hour to $64.20 a megawatt hour. So potential savings. The vote will be Wednesday at the AMP board meeting. And the AMP hydro units coming online. We have January, February, and parts of March. So 6 out of the 11 units are online, and we're receiving power from them. So,
anything else?
That's all.
Did you say from 76 to 64?
$67.93 a megawatt hour to $64.20.
Well, that's an improvement. Thank you. Anybody have anything else? Well, we will now adjourn. Thank you very much for being with us.